Well, hi everybody, and look, thanks very much indeed for coming along to the Scanning Pens webinar. And today we are very, very lucky to have two great presenters that are going to outline some wonderful words of wisdom for us. I mean, Scanning Pens is an international company, and we're lucky enough to have great resources. And on today's webinar, our head of education, Julia Clouter, is brought along a friend, colleague, and mentor, possibly, Dr. Susie Nyman, who has a wealth of info to convey to us, including her science toolbox, which I'm very interested to see all about. Susie's actually been to Australia a couple of times, once in 1999, and again she was guest speaker presenter at the Learning Difference Convention in 2017 in Melbourne and Sydney. So there's a bit of a connection there with Australia. But together, these two presenters are going to provide a wealth of info on literacy strategies, dying to see the literacy iceberg, and much more. So perhaps I can just, without further ado, pass over to Julia. Thank you very much for getting up early in the UK, 7 a.m. there. It's 4 p.m. here in Sydney. If we've got some people that are watching in Adelaide, it's 3:30 and 2 p.m. in Singapore and in Perth. I know that there's been invitations sent out to people there as well. So great to have you on board, and over to you, Julia.
Hey, thank you. Welcome to all people of all nations. It's always exciting when we are able to broadcast around the world and share our knowledge and thoughts, and also be able to bring you some strategies, information, ideas that you might not have thought about or tried before that we know are going to really support your learners in classrooms and at home and in your learning spaces. So I'm just super excited today to be able to chat with my friends Dr. Susie Nyman. And David, you're right, she is a mentor, and we do very much exist on the same frequency and the same wavelength. We're both so excited by stuff and what it can do to support learning. So I know I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that we're the sort of people who will spend time in a charity shop looking around at the junk thinking, oh, I wonder if I could turn that into a learning resource so that I could teach segmenting words or whatever it is. So Susie and I kind of dwell in that space where we're always preoccupied by how can we make this fun? What can I repurpose that for? How can I create a hook? What idea can I develop here to make something exciting? And so that's why I'm really super excited when I'm able to present with Susie, because we feed off each other's energy and spark ideas all the time. So if we end up going off on one, you'll know why. It's because it's kindred spirits connecting about education.
Thank you, Julia. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today. We've already had some practice runs and had such good fun doing it. So we're just looking forward to talking together, really, and sharing all our ideas.
Perfect. David, can I ask you please to mute your microphone, and that way I make you disappear, boom, as if by magic. Wonderful. And we'll catch up with David a bit later on. So thank you ever so much, everybody joining us for this presentation. It's not a Scanning Pens presentation, but I have got at the start some strategies that you might not have thought about that you can use with a scanning pen. And then we're going to be looking through at Susie's really fabulous multisensory learning support ideas that will help us to really embed that learning. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of fun along the way. There's an opportunity for you to ask us questions via Facebook or via our Click Meeting webinar chat, and if you want to post questions, we will do our best to answer them and make this an interactive session as we get towards the end of the webinar. So please feel that you can ask us what you would like, and if you've got questions about how you might want some support to teach a particular concept, we might have an idea. I'm sure we can brainstorm something as we go. Okay, so our webinar today is called Live Literacy. Why did we call it Live Literacy Strategies, Susie?
Because we're live.
Oh, we're going live, not because everything we do is sort of live and energetic.
Well, we can have that as well, but I just thought because it was live, I thought it was quite nice to put that in the title.
I like that idea too. So this is me, and David's already introduced me as head of education. So I was a Senko and a teacher for about 25 years and loved that, really enjoyed it. Spent some of my time teaching quite challenging young people who needed lots of additional support, who didn't thrive and survive particularly well in the classroom environment and needed sort of more specialised support. Many of them with huge literacy challenges underneath behaviour difficulties. And that's part of the reason why we started to have, Susie and I, a conversation about the literacy iceberg, which we'll talk a bit more about in a moment, because what we understand is that you tend to have signals and symbols at the top. You know that there is a problem, but you don't necessarily see the depth of the problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and provide you with some strategies to be able to help. Susie, this is you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Susie Nyman from the Sixth Form College, Farnborough. This is my classroom, one of the very few teachers that actually have their own classroom. And behind me, we've got lots of books. And here I've laid out my table. It's a bit like a stall. Reminds me of the Victoria Market in Melbourne, to be honest. Here we go. Here's my stall with all my different strategies on. And at the bottom, it's actually on a Mr. Blobby tablecloth. And when I was working at the Oratory, I didn't like the brown table, so I bought a whole collection of tablecloths. And every time the boys came in, they'd have a different tablecloth, one like this, a blue one, or even one with chemical symbols on if we were doing a chemistry lesson. And there's lots and lots of different props there, and I'll talk about them, but it doesn't just have to be for science. You can also use them for many, many other subjects. My students tend to be quite low ability, to be honest, so I've developed a lot of these strategies to help them to pass their exams and understand science. Okay. I can't hear you, Julia.
Thank you. I'm excited to find out what's on your table. I'm so excited I forgot to unmute. So we'll dig into that. Right. We'll dig into that as we go along. Okay. Yes. So today a reader, tomorrow a leader. Why did you choose that quote?
Because if you can learn to read, then you can lead your team. If you can't read, you just can't, you know, you can't access information. And it's really important to be able to learn to read and maybe use strategies to help you to read. You could be using the scanning pen, you know, with your Prisoners' Voices project that you do. Now, I listened to that with Christine Franklin, and how, you know, people in prison were desperate to be able to read to their children a bedtime story, and they couldn't. And then they used a scanning pen. And what this chap wanted to do was to actually be able to read the Gruffalo story to his child at night. I mean, it was amazing. And that he used his scanning pen, and eventually he was able to read it to his daughter. And then she started doing better at school because she could see her dad was interested. So there's various assistive technology you can use, but this is just one of them. This is, you know, and you've got 3 or 4 different pens out there, but it's really nice to be able to teach someone to read and access that information and not feel really nervous about reading stuff and filling in forms, etc.
It's really powerful. And if you're interested in the all of the prisoner research that we've done, I'd suggest have a look at the Scanning Pen's website and have a look at the section on prisons, because it's been really revealing to us just about how powerful being able to give people who have very low levels of literacy the power to read, and it has such a huge impact on their lives. And I think it's well worth, just if you're interested, exploring that. Our field has been in education, and so to be able to see the benefit and impact when people actually start to read at any age in life is empowering. It makes me want to do more. So there are so many barriers to reading, and Susie and I guess this webinar idea started when we came up with an idea of this literacy iceberg. We just happened to be chatting, and Susie and I were saying, well, there is the things that you can see as a teacher in the classroom, and then there's lots of other things going on underneath. And I think the initial context that we were talking about was well-being, and what you can see with students coming back from the COVID learning experience in the UK, where children have been away from school for long periods of time and then come back, and you can only see so much. And you know that you need to re-support, or and then it's just a question of trying to filter through and work out what's going on. And then we started to think about this as in a literacy context. And I love the idea that Susie came up with the Titanic floating by the iceberg there. And the reason we've got lots of smoke coming off is because it's the things that you think in the classroom as a teacher that are your signals, your little warning bells that come across to you from a student. And it might be something like this student's really struggling with the words here, or repeating them differently to the way that I've said them. There's something getting muddled there. Or you might be thinking that we've got real problems with grammar and punctuation here, and you might address that as you're going along with those students. But because we're in this fast-paced working environment with so many students, with so many challenges, sometimes we don't see that whole bigger picture. And actually, if we're seeing the exhaust, if we're seeing the smoke, we're just starting to get a glimmer of what's going on. But underneath, there can be so many other challenges that we're not necessarily aware of. And I think this is definitely the case for learners with SpLD dyslexia, that sometimes we miss all of this stuff going on. And I think one of the biggest things is tiredness and exhaustion of our students. The business of processing is such a brain energy intense business that we're pushing on with the learning, and we don't necessarily realize how hard that student is running just to stand still and catch up. So if you can put technology and supports into your classroom to just alleviate perhaps the challenge of reading, doing the reading, I think that's a huge support and help for these students. Susie?
Yeah, and it's not just visual processing that is the problem, particularly with my students. It's this auditory processing as well. So teachers are giving instructions to the students in class, and I call it the ripple effect. I start around the room and I'll tell the whole class what to do, and then I check the learning with that person, that person, that person, that person, all the way round in the middle. I have the people that I need to double check on. So I call it the ripple effect. I tell the class what they've got to do. Maybe 50% have understood me. And then I go to the middle of the groups of threes, and then I check with them. Do you understand what you're doing? No, go over it again. Then that person in the central position then explains it to the other two students either side. So it then ripples around the class. Oh, Susie said this, Susie said this. And then you have the SpLD students there, sits by the window over there. Susie, I know the hand's coming up because it always does. There's always one or two after I've said it that they'll then say, oh, Susie, I don't get that. So you say it again, and you've got to use different language. You've got to use different ways of explaining it. And I often talk about this in like an onion. You start with the core material. So I'll tell the class, this is what we're going to do. That's the core material. Then I'll go over it again. This is how we're going to do it. And then I go over it again and again. It could be 5 different ways I do it until that student has understood. And when every single person in the class understands, then they can get on with the task. And John Stein talks about auditory and visual processing. And working with boys at the oratory school, there were a lot of them there. It wasn't just visual processing, it was auditory processing. And so I would say something to them and they just look blank. And that Collins book of body language is extremely useful. You can tell just by the way they sit that they haven't got it. So I'd look around the room and you can tell, you know, from their faces, no, I haven't got it, I haven't got it. So you try again, and you've got to try in different ways. And whatever instructions you give, you've got to be aware that that student may not have got it the first time. And as Julia said, it's due, particularly in literacy, it's due to many of these different things under the iceberg. Short-term memory. I can think of a girl that sat behind me, and we would go through it. We'd go through what we had to do, and we have these little mini whiteboards that we then write instructions down on, or they write instructions down on, and they leave it by the desk, and we write the instructions on here, and then they write it out, and they know what they're doing. And each individual student has to know what they're doing, and they might have to be told in a different way, and that's so important. So this particular student has short-term memory difficulties. We would write down individually what she had to do. But what I had to do quite often was also link to something that she understood. And we were writing about a case study to do with someone in hospital, for example, and I linked it to her sister, who was a nurse. And after I linked it to her sister, she could then do it. And that's really what's important, is that link, that relatability as well. They don't want to appear different to their peers. Well, I'm looking underneath here. They don't want to appear different to their peers, but you've got to sort of get in there and get them to understand without making them look silly. They don't want to feel uncomfortable. They don't want to be different. They do get confused with your directions. And they are vulnerable, when they don't understand, and they can just switch off. And it's digging in there, finding out why they're switched off, speaking to the tutors, and having that whole picture about the student. And then once you've got that, you can then get in there and start teaching them. Did you find that, Julia? You have to know that student. It's no use just going in there and teaching them. You need that one hook. Our head of pastoral care calls it that one thing. If you've got that one thing about that student, in order to get into their brain and want them to work. And they say, oh, I'm working for you, Susie. They're not working for me. They're working for themselves. But you've got to find that one thing. Do you work in a chip shop? Have you got an old granny living with you in your house? Are you caring for your mother? Have you got a disabled brother? You just need to know that one thing. Do you work at B&Q? So the girl says to me, oh, Susie, I've finished my work. You can do it when you're B&Q it. And it's all about that, empowering them to want to do it in a way that they understand.
That's right. And if you're really struggling to motivate someone with literacy support, you've got to find the thing that switches them on. And that only comes from investing a bit of time and having those conversations. So we've gone through, and I think it's so helpful. The examples you've given are so helpful. We can't see these things underneath the iceberg. The only way that you get to them is by having that conversation. And I'm going to just talk about a couple of other things as well, and that is not wanting to appear different to your peers, which is a really big deal, and also not wanting to accept support or use accessibility tools, which is also a significant barrier, I think, for a lot of our learners. And ways that how we deal with that, how we introduce our accessibility supports is really important. Normalizing things. So I'll just talk very briefly about scanning pens and just say, well, do you know what? Instead of saying, why don't you take out your reader pen, which actually emphasizes what this tool is for, you could say that might be a job for the white pen. And that way you've destigmatized this, or you've taken the attention away from it being a tool that supports with reading. And I think that's really important. The other thing that you can do is that you can have something like this. This is a little speaker unit here. And if you came across a word as you were working through a piece of coursework, and you could then model that to the entire group. So you could say, okay, I'm going to use the dictionary function now, and let's listen to this definition so everybody knows the definition. So that way you've modeled the use of that tool, and it's destigmatized it. And I think that's so important that we do that. So I'm going to just briefly share some strategies that you might not have thought about if you have scanning pens or a reader pen that can do a bit of literacy support for you. So let's just give you a couple of strategies, and then I'm going to absolutely hand over to Susie with all her wonderful market stall behind her. Okay. So just if you're not familiar, the Reader Pen does a few different things here. It is essentially a device that will read text. It will decode. It has an inbuilt dictionary. You can transfer information from the pen to your computer. That's great if you happen to be doing a close exercise. In other words, you might have a document that's already got a comprehension task on it and some words. It's possible to pick up those words and drop them into that closed activity. That might be useful in transferring, or it might just save someone who really struggles with their fine motor skills and grip with their pencil to do lots and lots of writing. It's also got a recorder, and I've got some strategies using the recorder in a moment that I'll share with you. So the text reader is so useful because you can put it into different accents. So I have today put mine into an Australian accent. There you go. I've planned ahead because I thought that would be fun. Now, if you have got these in your class and you know that there is a large section of text that is coming up, a strategy that you might not have thought of using is pre-recording. So in other words, you can use the scan to file by scanning all of the text on the page and have it stored in the pen, so that instead of the student having to do the scanning, you can hand a pre-loaded pen with that information on it. So all they've got to do is press play and they can go back and listen to that section of text. And that's quite useful. Might be something you've not thought of before. Yeah, Australian accent is very cool. I'm going to demo a little bit in a minute, but let's see if I can give you something here. So I've just switched my pen on to text reader, and I'm just going to scan across the line and press my play, and you can hear it. Whoops, there we go, through my speaker.
Not wanting to accept, support, or use accessibility tools.
Okay, let's find our Australian accent for a bit of fun there. So I'm just going to go into settings, menu language, English, talking menu. Whoops, back I go. Menu language, text to speech settings. I can have English voice, Spanish voice. Oh, why can't I find it? I know what I've done. The girl with two pens.
Ah.
So this one I have set up for Australian voice, and actually it's got a bit more battery, so I'm glad I noticed that. And I'm going to scan that again, and you can hear it with the Australian accent. And actually we know that when students are listening in their native accent, they relate to things. Again, it's those hooks. It's much more relatable. So I'm going to hit the text reader. And let's try that again.
Not wanting to accept, support, or use accessibility tools.
There we go. So there's our Australian accent on there, which I think is rather wonderful. So use this to read again. Look in your stored resources, and in that scan to file, that's where you will keep all of that pre-scanned text. So that's a great strategy for you, and that enables your students to be able to listen on demand rather than have to scan things themselves. Useful if you have got a large piece of text that might need decoding at the start of a lesson. I'm going to go on to my second strategy for you now. If I can find my up and down arrows, there we are. Okay, so in the dictionary section of the pen, which I'm sure you also know about as well, there is a menu within a menu. That's kind of how I think of it. So I'm just going to bring myself to the center and make you disappear for a second, Susie. Or
Okay.
no, okay. There we go. That's a bit better. You can see this better now. Alrighty. Okay, so if you go into the dictionary settings, you'll see that you can pick up word definitions there. But what you might not know is that if you press menu, once you've actually gone into that dictionary, you can get a history of words come up. Now, this might be useful if you're scanning a deck of words for pre-learning, or their keywords for a set of subject homeworks. So you can ask your student to scan, and then everything is in the history. And then if they're not familiar with that word, they could have that pen in their pocket and be relearning the definitions of that word, because all you need to do is click into it, go back, and then you've got all your definitions to hand. So a really useful tool for supporting your homework. And I'm going to give you a third strategy, which is around your own fluency. You might want to consider providing a piece of text and the reader pen as a fluency probe activity. So if you wanted a student to recognise how much reading progress that they are actually making, you can give them that text and ask them to time it. So if you set up for the recorder on the pen, which is just in the settings there, quite easy to get to, hit the record button, and then it gives you some options to record what you are saying. So start a timer, read your text, and then you can listen and play back. If you've spoken for a minute, you can then judge your reading fluency, how many words, how far you got across that piece of text within a minute. And then after a bit of practice, and after reviewing, and after perhaps using your reader pen or other accessibility tools, you can go back and do this activity again, and then see how far you've got. And I think that's a great self-esteem builder, because you are going to make progress from the first recording to the second recording, providing you've done a little bit of work in between. And that might just be the spark that inspires a student to think, actually, I am making progress with my reading. I can say I am, because that's how much I did in a minute 2 weeks ago, and this is how much progress I'm making now. So that's a fluency probe. I thought that'd be quite useful. Of course, there are other ways to do this. I've put a picture of a very old-fashioned tape recorder on, especially for David there, because he's quite ancient, and also for me, because I remember using these in my French lessons at school to do my French vocab. But I was thinking about the immediacy of those recorders that we used to use 30 years ago, and it was just a question of putting in the tape and recording, so you could do that fairly easily. And I think there are devices you could do that with. If you're going to record it onto a computer, you might need a microphone. That might take a little while, but this is also something students could do using a mobile phone. I just think it's a really great way of using a strategy to see your own progress, and students really thrive when they recognize how much progress they're making. So those are my little top tips there.
Yeah, sometimes, Julia, I say to the students, you can get your phones out, because normally they're not allowed to use them, and they lay them all out on the tables in front of me. And I then dictate to them the sequence, you know, maybe blood flow through the heart, it could be the digestive system, and they sit there and I speak it really clearly, and then they use that for revision.
Perfect.
All of them, all in one go.
We need to use the tools that we've got. We really do. It makes a big difference. And I think if you're growing up with technology, you should have that technology to hand to be able to use it. But that's another story, isn't it? And we'll make progress with it. So Susie, I'm going to hand over to you now, and your literacy strategies for supporting your science teaching in your classroom from Farnborough. And so it's wonderful to have a window into your world. I'm very excited about your table full of goodies there.
Thank you very much. Can we go back to the slides?
Yes.
That's great. So over to me, live literacy strategies. This is what I've developed for my students, working in curriculum support in a school for 7 years, but also at the Sixth Form College Farnborough. As I said before, a lot of my students are quite low ability and they don't retain information. So I remember 2013, a girl sat in my class and she said, I don't do science, I can't do it. And then the two girls either side of her said, I don't do it either. And I thought, what on earth am I going to do? So we started using Play-Doh and making models, and then they started to understand it. We were clapping the keywords for the heart to Michael Jackson's Beat It, and all of a sudden they relaxed and they started to understand the information, and then be able to retain it. So today I'm going to talk about my top 10 interesting words and how to remember them. I've got lots of interesting words, but these all link together. So I'm going to look at the word, the image, the number of letters, the shapes of the words, the word roots, and remembering. Think of a link, and it's that hook that the students need in order to remember the information. I thought for fun, I'd do the essay writing Hamburger, seeing as it was about literacy strategies and how to model an essay writing, essay writing using a Hamburger on useful multisensory props. And then finally, for the digestive system, I do have my balloons and my top tips and strategies for remembering difficult scientific terminology. So here we go. The Hamburger. Wait a second. Here we go. The Hamburger. And I went to a shop in Guildford and I said, excuse me, please, can I buy that hamburger? And the lady had actually hidden it on the top shelf in the shop because she said, it's not a very good seller. And I said, well, you're going to sell one today, madam. So for my hamburger here, I thought we'll start with a hamburger and follow through with the literacy strategies. In a hamburger, you've got carbohydrates, polysaccharides, monosaccharides, fat, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, protein, polypeptides, amino acids. There's a lot of difficult words to understand there. But on the next slide, I'm going to show you how those students might be able to remember some of those words. So here, the hamburger, it gives you energy. It's got 9 letters. It's actually from the seaside town of Hamburg in the 1800s. We had a chat about this earlier with Julia. And all hamburgers, if they were eaten by the Americans in a year, if they were lined up, they would actually circle the earth 32 times. That's how many hamburgers those Americans eat. And you can see there that I've got a word shape. And I found this Jenga Tetris in a charity shop, £2, what a bargain. And so you could actually use those word shapes and write on there, hamburger, and then the students can actually see that. So here, the next one, we've got carbohydrate, is used for energy, 12 letters, and you can see the shapes of those letters within that word. And it comes from carbohydrate, the Greek word for carbon, meaning carbo, and hydro for water. So it's a hydrated form of carbon. So sort of split that word down so that you can understand it. Polysaccharide, here, have a picture because when you learn, left side is for logic, right side of the brain is creative. If you actually use the words and the pictures together, you're more likely to remember the information. So a polysaccharide provides energy. It's got 14 letters. It's a long word. Break it up into constituent parts. And it comes from the Greek word polou, meaning many, and saccharon, meaning sugar. And the way I would remember it is that a polygon is a shape with many, many sides. Monosaccharide, here, you've got a picture of glucose there. Energy, you've got 14 letters, and it comes from mono, meaning alone. Saccharon, again, meaning sugar. Monocle, I think of monocle, an eyeglass there, so mono meaning one. Here we got fats, they're for energy, storage and insulation, only 3 letters, and it comes from the Old English fat, meaning fat, fatted, plump, obese, and it comes from fetium, which means to cram or to stuff. And here I had an idea, good fats are fishy fats, bad fats are beef fats, just to remember those. Here we've got saturated fats, and when I show the saturated fats, I actually use lolly sticks so that they can see that. They really like that, the students. The increased cholesterol, we've got 9 letters, and you can see the shape of that word there, and it comes from the Latin word meaning filled. And the saturated are solids, and they're full of hydrogens. The unsaturated here improves cholesterol. We've got 11 letters, and it's from the Latin not and saturat, meaning filled. There we go. UVW, unsaturated vegetable oils and walnuts. That's, I thought you could remember that one. Proteins, you've got eggs, meat and cheese there for growth and repair. 7 letters, you can see only 1 sticking up there for the T. So the protein comes from, again, as I said before, proteus, meaning primary, and holding the first place. Protein, maybe pork and pepperoni. And then we've got polypeptides, a picture again, making proteins, 15 letters. And it comes from the Greek word poly, meaning many, and peptis, meaning digestive. And we've got, again, sorry?
Susie, all I was thinking was just how exciting it is to give students the morphology and actually give them the keys into the words. I think this is such a smart thing to do, because people like mysteries. They like unpicking the story behind something. And I was just really enjoying your words and the Greek origins and thinking this is a fabulous hook for young people. You provide that hook, then it opens up a world, and then you can enter into discussion about language, can't you? So once you so you were talking about breaking down poly, meaning many. And that's it, and you were referring to polygon. And I was thinking, well, what other subjects might you come across this poly word? And it reminded me of learning sociology a long time ago, polyandry, which I think is many husbands, isn't it? Polyandry.
Oh yes,
absolutely. So once you've learnt these keys, once I remembered that, once you've learnt these keys, they stick with you for a lifetime. And I think it's a really helpful strategy you've provided there.
Yeah, and we will break those words down here. You can see, and this is what I did with the boys, particularly the Nigerian ones, that they couldn't hear what I was saying with complicated words. So I broke it down on Postit Notes so that they could remember them. This actually happened when I was talking to a boy about group 2 metals, and I said beryllium, and he couldn't hear what I was saying. And so I broke it down like this, and then he understood it a lot better. So with any of these complex scientific words, you could break it down using these Post-it notes, or what I did do with the boys was I used tiles. And when I lived in Oxfordshire, my next door neighbour had a kiln. I used to do pottery with her. So we would get the tiles, and I found that with the dyslexic boys, we would write the words on the tiles. We also did the periodic table. That's why there's numbers on them. So you could break the words down, and it doesn't have to be tiles. It could be laminated pieces of coloured card, and then they can remember it much better using that. So that's a couple of strategies there. So I just put those on the floor. I'll just go on to my last word here, amino acid. We've got a picture of amino acid there. They're used to make polypeptides. And there's 2 words, there's 5 and 4. And amino comes from amine, and it means from the Latin acidus, sour, sharp and tart. And fish smell because of the amines that they produce. So it comes from amine ammonia. So if you can actually show them that hook, what ammonia looks like as a structure, they can then remember it. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, Julia, because here we have the Hamburger, the famous essay writing Hamburger. So essay writing can be as a hamburger. You can have the bun at the top, can be the essay title. The lettuce can be the introduction. The first topic paragraph. We've got the tomato here. Point, example, explanation, link to next paragraph, or point, example, explanation, relate, or PEGX, point, example. It depends on how you're teaching those students. We've then got the cheese. The cheese would be topic paragraph 2. And then we would have the burger underneath. The burger will be topic paragraph 3, point example explanation link, or point example explanation relate. And then finally, the conclusion would be the bun at the bottom. And what I've shown here is the essay writing pack from Oka, and Julia's got that already prepared somewhere. So you can actually see this here. You don't have to buy it necessarily. It's just some ideas in that they've created these essay plans, as you can see here, color coded. And therefore you could get a sheet of paper and color code that, or just get strips of colored paper and get them to write the introduction in one color, the 3 paragraphs in a different color, and the conclusion in another. It gives you different ideas, making it interesting. And here it's got the essay title, the introduction, paragraph 1, 2, and 3, and the conclusion with the linked sentences in between. Tells you how to write the introduction. You can use P or you can use PL. It depends on what you're using. Point, evidence, evaluate, stay focused, the conclusion, how to write a conclusion, and then getting started. And my son, when he had to write essays, I said to Julia earlier that he couldn't do English. At the age of 7, the teacher said, your son can't do English, he's just not very good at it. What are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know. And so what I did was, one night the teacher said, I want him to write a story about the forest. And we lived in a place called Woodcote, and Woodcote means surrounding by woods. And so we were always in the woods. And I said to him, okay, let's have a chat about it. So we sat at the dining room table, and I had a piece of paper, and I got a piece of paper out, and I drew this mind map. And I said, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about touch, taste, smell, all the senses as you walk through that forest. And we had a chat. And I said, we're walking through the forest with the dog. What can you smell? What can you touch? What can you taste? What does it smell like? And all of a sudden, he came up with this amazing sentences, paragraphs, and everything. And this is a boy who would never write anything. And so we chatted about it. And as he chatted, I just wrote the key words down on this mind map. And then I said, now it's over to you. And he said, okay, Mum. And he sat there and he wrote a paragraph. This boy never even wrote a sentence. He then wrote 2 paragraphs. He wrote a page and he said, Mum, I want to keep going. He wrote a page and a half. And I said, hang on there. You can stop if you like. Don't go overboard. You only need to do a page. He wrote a page and a half, took it in the next day. And the teacher said, yeah, that's brilliant. He's written a really good essay. The problem was at the time, that was the very first essay I remember him doing. He kept writing and then, and then, and then. And I said, why does he keep writing and then? The teacher said he needs more connectives. So I made a keyring of connectives, and I'll show you that later, so that he could then surreptitiously flick it in his bag when he was doing his essays at school, and then find some new words to start the sentences with. What he needed was structure, and he passed his GCSE English, I would say mathematically, by having a brilliant teacher, but knowing a structure, knowing his connectives, knowing the key words, and just writing it out in a logical way. And we've got here, number 14, introducing the quotes, and he would have quotes around his bedroom on the wall, and he just learnt so many quotes, and then he put it all together. And I think that was the secret. And knowing what different essay types were, compare and contrast essays, how to give examples, give alternative examples, and show the results. So I think that's really useful. I'm not saying you have to buy the Oka book, but use some sort of scaffolding to enable that student to be able to write their essays and cope with writing any essays for any subject. Just have that system that you're going to use. Okay, can we go back to the slides, Julia? Brilliant, thank you. So here, explaining the paragraphs, what is your point? Point 1, what's your example? What's your explanation? And what's your link going to be? Now, I've spoken about multisensory props earlier. Here we go. We've got a story here. So my brother said to me, he's got 2 twins. He said, my children can't write essays. He said, you've got between Staines and East Grinstead, when we're going to my sister's for a party, to teach my children how to write stories. So I said, okay. So I bought a packet of random sweets, and they had one each, and they took out the sweets. Oh, there's a lock there. And what I did was I gave them a keyring of connectives that I made like this in the back of the car. And so I would open the connectives and I would say, one cold morning, and then they had to get a sweet out. And they created this story with the connectives. And by the time we got to East Grinstead, they knew how to write a story. It was amazing. And it was the same technique as I'd used with my son, where I said, you know, you've got to think about the 5 senses when you're writing about it, and you need a structure. And we went through everything. And by the time we got to the party, they could write a story, which was amazing. And they could take this keyring of connectives away and use it in class. Here we've got paper chains. And I used that with a boy called James. He had to link the characters together for his A-level English. And he couldn't work it out. And I took them in and he linked them all together. Who was married to who, whose children were who. And he linked them all together. And I said to him, do you understand it now, James? And he said, yes. I said, do you want to chuck it in the bin now? You finished it? No, miss, that's my revision. I'm taking that away with me. Here we have dominoes. So we've got the name of a person here, a character and a description, and you can link all those together. That's really useful. And also, as I started earlier, I said I made a spider diagram or mind map in order to help my son write his story, and that's for French there. Here I'm going to talk about my signature lesson, my digestive system signature lesson. And here, first of all, we've got keywords on stickers. And what I've got here is images as well as words. And you could use the scanning pen to actually scan those words so that you can understand them. And so Julia can scan those because you'll hear it. I mean, I can use my scanning pen, but it's not going to sound very loud. You've got yours on your you've got yours on the loudspeaker, haven't you?
I have. I think we're ready to go. That means it's turning on. Right. What do you want me to scan?
Well, just scan mouth for now.
Okay. Right. I'm just going to select text reader. Mouth. Right. That's the first one. Here we go. Okay. So it's come up on my pen.
Yeah.
Mouth.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm looking at the time because we're 10 minutes before the end. So I'm going to whiz through the techniques quite quickly, actually. Again, you could use the tiles and you could write those words on the tiles and then clap the keywords to a song. McDonald's, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. And then you could, that song, you could then clap those keywords to. Whatever song you want to, something that the children are familiar with. So clap those keywords and clap the syllables. Here we've got those words again, broken down. Oh, I've got the sew lost. The sew's dropped off. And here we've color-coded those words so that people can remember them. There's the sew. Esophagus, the esophagus. There we go. Okay. So also, we could look at the shape of those words. And here I've used paper chains. And you can see the shape, the liver where the word the L goes up and the gallbladder, the G goes down. So that's that. We can also make a keyrings of the keywords and possibly use the scanning pen again to write those and read those. Here we have a satin mat. And what I've done with the students is I've made these maps, various different ones, and then what we do is we put the map down and we have the keywords color-coded on the card. So we've got esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, small intestine, large intestine, colon, rectum, and anus. And the students walk through that and talk through the words, then they can remember it better. And you can use this. You can make this on wallpaper, for example, any old wallpaper that you've got left in the house. Now, Julia really likes me doing this. So the next thing we're going to do are balloons. So the mouth, where you have chemical and physical digestion. So here we've got the mouth, okay? And what you could do is get the students then to stick the sticker on there for the mouth, okay? If they wanted to, so you can link two things together. From the mouth, we then have the esophagus. And the students can't spell the word esophagus. They find it really hard. So when I teach it, I say esophagus. It's much easier to remember it like that. So there's the esophagus, which then goes into the stomach. And the stomach produces acid, hydrochloric acid, and it breaks down proteins into polypeptides using the enzyme pepsin. Okay, what happens next is we have the liver. And when I ask the students about the liver, I say it rhymes with quiver. And I know my old head of biology was always getting students to, I'll use a different colour actually, to say the words so that they could remember them. I taught one boy who was dyslexic, and he would quite often have difficulty saying the words, and therefore he couldn't spell them. So it was really important to use the colour Post-its to break the word down so that he could actually understand what I was saying. I also taught a hearing impaired boy, and so I had to speak very slowly with him. So there's a liver, it's triangular shape. And then after that, we have the gallbladder, which I often do green, quite small, here. So there's the gallbladder. So the liver and the gallbladder here. Stomach, liver, gallbladder here. Then we have, so mouth, esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder. Then we have the pancreas. Pancreas is really important, produces bicarbonate to neutralize the acid from the stomach. It also produces enzymes, carbohydrases, proteases and lipases. And for diabetics, it's really important because it produces insulin. Insulin converts glucose to glycogen, and then breaking the glycogen back down using glucagon back to glucose if you need that glucose again, energy, for example, running for the bus. So there's the pancreas. Here, leaf-shaped structure that you'll find under the stomach. Oh, there we go. And then we have the small intestine. Oh, that one was a bit squeaky. The small intestine, and then we have the small intestine contains villi, and it's there that food is further broken down. Billy, increase the surface area of the small intestine. And here, I've got one of those washing mat things that you use to wash the car. That represents the villi. And underneath here, we've got the capillaries and the lymphatic system. So there's the small intestine. And then the large intestine, reabsorption of water and formation of feces. Okay, here's the large intestine. Can't quite get this one to work. Here's the large intestine. The balloon is difficult. Yeah. There we go. There's the large intestine. Here we go. There's the large intestine. You see, it's got a larger diameter. So that is used for the reabsorption of water and the formation of feces. Looking at the time, we've got the mouth. We've got the mouth here. We've got the esophagus, we've got the stomach, we've got the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, and then we've got the small intestine, used for breaking down the food further with the enzymes, carbohydrates, proteases, lipases, and then the large intestine is used for reabsorption of water and formation of feces. Okay, so that's that one. We may want to sequence those events again using Post-its, and dyslexic students find this really hard to sequence information. And then here we've got a football with key questions on, but I've also put pictures on as well on there. For example, describe the function of the small intestine. Okay, so Julia, do you want to go back to the slides, because we're coming up to 8 o'clock.
I know, and there's so much you could show us. Susie, I just wanted you to talk a little bit more before you move on about that football and how that might be used in a classroom.
Okay, so we had a student went into an exam and she got 28% in the exam the first time round. We got the football and put all the questions on. I did this with the boys for the last 4 years of the exams for GCSE biology, and we threw the ball. And where you catch it with your thumb, you ask those key questions. All these questions on here are for past exam questions, and you go over and over and over it until they understand it. And they love it because it's fun. But obviously with COVID, you'd have to wipe it each time with an alcohol wipe, wouldn't you? Yeah. Okay. So we've got the Post-it notes, play the weakest link. They love that. Playing the weakest link, you'll have a keyword, what happens in the mouth, and they have to write the word down. And then they love playing that. And a storyboard, a day in the life of a cheese sandwich. Actually write out the story. What happens? Just get a piece of paper, because people with dyslexia are quite good at drawing, and they can use stick men if they want. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
That takes the stress out of it, doesn't it? If you're allowed to draw. Totally takes stress out of it. I was really enjoying your demonstration with your balloon, Susie, and I was just thinking how great that would have been if I'd been in your class, to have been part of a group and allowed to perhaps recreate having watched your demonstration, or make it myself, or have that as a homework task, or to be able to, in a group, everyone be responsible for one part to reconstruct the model, with the responsibility for writing that word and sticking the label on and redrawing it. Because what we know is that when we start to physically work with ideas, when it becomes more than just a written exercise, an exercise that just exists between the brain and the hand, somehow it gets so much better embedded into our knowledge. It's become physical, real learning. I love the idea that my feet have a memory of where they're going to walk to, you know. I think I've got memory in my feet. I'm a musician. I don't necessarily read music. I'm an appalling sight reader for music, but somehow my fingers remember the tunes that I know, even ones that I haven't played for a long time. It seems to be embodied in me. It seems to be in my fingers. And if I just allow myself to relax and twiddle about, all of that learning that I did comes back. And I think there's something really powerful that you are giving us here, which is about transferring stuff that's academic, can be quite dry really, and academic,
and quite difficult. I'm just going to see if I can
difficult. Yeah, into something very exciting, very accessible, and something that you feel, hey, I could do that. I could blow up a balloon. I could attach that. I could have that experience. You're turning it into a can do. And for dyslexic learners who tend to be actually quite practical, it's a great solution, isn't it? What have you got there, Susie?
So this is my pottery model, and you can make this out of Play-Doh, and you've got the esophagus, and they can feel it, and they can feel that the liver is triangular shaped. They can feel the stomach is J-shaped, that the pancreas is like a leaf, and the small intestine is quite small, and the large intestine has a wider diameter, and they can feel that. And then they could make that at home, like you said, make it out pottery or sourdough or anything, or tin foil, which is what is on my slide, because I did that with a girl at home. And then they could take that photo and upload it on their phone. And that's how they're going to remember it, with the labels.
Really good. And yeah, and another great, actually, we've done a lot of home learning in the UK while we've been locked down. So the idea that you could actually create something and then just send the photograph, that's still fantastic learning.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you've been stuck to a computer all day, running through PowerPoints, information and so on, to be given a practical learning opportunity, I think would be a real reward for those learners who are going to struggle to just absorb that information that's text heavy and then text heavy driven when you've got to produce it at the other end. So I'm absolutely certain that you are sharing a cornucopia of ideas with people today, and I know that they're going to put them into their briefcase and use them when they get back into school or when they're teaching. I'm absolutely certain.
I'm just going to finish off the last few slides, I think, because I'm aware that we're going a bit over time, but some of the things I'm going to say will be useful. So if I go just to the next slide, scanning pens are all over the world. We've got a nice map there. And this 780 million people is what they suggested. If the population is 780 billion, 1 in 10 would have it. And so possibly this many people in the world might have dyslexia. The things I've spoken about today, here we've got the connective key rings and James's paper chains. I've written a book on the multisensory teaching toolkit, and then we've got how to become a grade riser. And I've written this exam question task board that's really useful, and it's published by Ochre Books. There are videos, and they actually, the BDA, British Dyslexia Association, actually videoed me in this classroom. There's a free video there, and also Ochre Books have made some free videos. And today, what we've spoken about is the literacy iceberg, how important it is. Julia's spoken about the reader pen, pre-scanning process check, play and self-check. I've spoken about my top 10 words, how to break them down, how to remember them, how to write an essay using the essay writing Hamburger, the digestive system signature lesson, various ways that you can teach that and make it fun. And my revision and examination resources are published by Ochre Books. Then finally, thanks. Any questions, you can post them in the chat, or you can get us at Julia on Twitter, or there's her email address there, and my Twitter and my email address there. And I really wanted to thank Bryony for making that beautiful diagram of the iceberg and the hamburger. It just shouts at you, doesn't it? The hamburger, it's just, you just want to eat it. And I've got some extra resources here that you can use, and a lot of them are free. So here, if you want to look at those last two slides, freeze the page for a minute, and then you can look at some other free videos and articles that I've written. So that's it. Any questions? We haven't got any questions in the chat box, have we?
Oh, I can see someone's typing, and I can see a question there, so that's good. Susie, I was just going to mention that if you just pop your name into YouTube, it's really, you can get to some resources very, very quickly, video resources. So don't worry too much about this. If you wanted to contact us, I will happily send this information to you. That's absolutely fine. We're really happy to support and help, because we're in the business of signposting, helping and supporting. So I've seen we've got a question there, and it says, can you use a headphone with a reader pen? And the answer is yes, you can. This little port here that I showed, that's the one that I plugged my speaker into. You can just plug headphones into that, or you can use the inbuilt speaker that's actually in the reader pen itself. I suppose the advantage of having that headphone attached is that it's pretty discreet, and we know that younger learners, they seem to be getting support and help. So having that headphone just discreetly in your ear can make a real difference to them either getting some support that they need or not. David, thank you so much for joining us again. Let's put us all centre stage.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Look, thank you, ladies. That was very informative, and I must say very entertaining. Icebergs and hamburgers and balloons and everything else that we just needed to see. Look, can I just extend a very big thank you to you two for getting up very early in the, I don't know if I was going to say the cold UK morning, but it might not be cold because summer's coming. It could be very tropical over there. And I would also like to say a lot of people here in Australia have my email address, so feel free to email me if there's any questions or you need contacts or you need any other information as far as that's concerned. But look, thank you so much. I don't know if there's any final words from either of you that you'd like to impart, words of wisdom that we can take away with us.
I'm going to say, make it sticky. Please create a hook, create a reason to want to learn, get involved with that student and find out what it is that is making learning sticky for them. And once you've got that hook, it's going to make things so much easier for you in the classroom, because you'll have their attention and you'll have their engagement. Susie?
Just make it fun. See that they enjoy it, share it, you know, get everybody involved. It doesn't matter if you think you look stupid, because they'll remember it. When I do the female reproductive system out of balloons like this, they never forget that lesson. They always remember it because they enjoy it. They enjoy the lesson when we do the one, you know, the digestive system. One girl said to me when we did the heart, we were clapping keywords to Michael Jackson's Beat It. She came out, she said, I've just learned the heart, but we never did any work. It was great. So make it fun, link it, and then it just all soaks in and they understand it and they remember it. It's the understanding, the hook, relatability, and then remember. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again, and thank you everybody that's attended today and those that have been watching on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's great to have that sort of level of support here in Oz, and anyone in Singapore that's also watching too. Thank you very much for making the time. So there you go.
Thank you.
I'll let you switch everything off, Julia. You're in control of the buttons, the big black buttons. So very good indeed.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody, and Susie, thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure.
Wonderful as always. Looking forward to our next opportunity to doing something together, which I hope will be soon.
Yes. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, thanks everybody.